Let us now see what are the different components that we need to have in a curriculum. Before I move on, is there anything that anybody would like to ask? Just a minute.
Yeah, Rupa ma'am, this is Lucy. I'm sorry. We've unmuted everybody, so I think we'll open it up for questions towards the end.
All right. Okay, so that sounds good. So we will take the importance of curriculum. I don't have to reiterate it. So that's the reason it is to realize the objectives of education. And how do we make a holistic, pointed, focused, crisp, and solid curriculum? I think the important things would be the different components that we would need. First and foremost is current context. Does your curriculum for each of the chapters that we are talking about have any associated real life application? When I say real life application, some problem in the near immediate future of ours or in their immediate environment, is it possible for you to tag that particular problem or issue and see what is the connect between what is being taught in the class and that particular problem? If there is one, that should be the focus and that should be highlighted in the curriculum. That is one of the important aspects. Second, how is your curriculum aligned with the policy? For us right now, NEP 2020 is the policy. And so how well is our curriculum aligned to the policy becomes an important thing. What are the things that NEP 2020 is looking at? And are we able to emulate and put all those things inside our curriculum would be the second thing. Third, statement of broad learning. Do we have learning objectives and learning outcomes? Does every teacher in your school understand the difference between an objective and an outcome? And how are you pitching your outcomes? So how do you pitch your outcomes? If you can go back in mind to the Bloom's taxonomy, your outcome should be focused right on top. Something where the child is able to analyze, is able to evaluate, is able to create, or is able to solve problems. So given the data that he or she has, they are able to do that. Does your curriculum cater to that kind of learning? Or are we pitching it at lower levels where we are just exposing them to different forms of learning and are expecting them to memorize everything? So where are we pitching our learning outcomes? To pitch to that kind of learning outcomes, what kind of objectives are we framing? So first of all, to understand what is the difference between this LO, that is learning objective, and the learning outcome, that becomes important. Second is, where are you pitching? That becomes crucial. And third thing is, what are you employing for the child to move from the level of understanding to all the way to the creation? So what is this pedagogy that you are adopting to do this? Let me tell you one thing. If we carefully follow all of this that is there, in the sense, if we restructure the curriculum really well, trust me, everything that you are going to be listening to thereafter or whatever you do after that, whether it is the SAFL that we are talking about, or if you are talking about the CBE, everything becomes related to this because everything is based on this particular curriculum restructure. Structure of the education system. This, of course, most of you would be having it in your curriculum. What is the timeline? What are the number of days? What are the periods allocated? That is very functional and important to do. Second is structure of the curriculum content. Now, before I go here, I would like to go back to the previous one. Timeline, days and periods allotted. Now, it is also very important in the beginning of the year when you are structuring the curriculum. First of all, your curriculum should not be a closed curriculum. What do I mean by that? Keep one end of it open, because tomorrow, what the situation is today is not going to be the situation, and you may need to add new real life application problems and situations. So one end of it is always kept open, first thing. Second thing is, very, very peculiarly in our system so far, we have had certain topics which surface in very different places. Like, for example, soils will come under geography, soils will also come under plants and crops, wherever crops are grown, especially in science and biology. So redundancy has to be reduced. If you are having a curriculum, it should be so strong that if there is a particular aspect that has been taught to the child, you are assessing it only at one place. There is no point spending double the time doing it in 2 different places and assessing it at 2 different times and giving the marks for the same thing that the child already knows, whether it is in geography or whether it is in biology. So please ensure that the head of the department sit together and they analyze and see if what is being taught here is not repeated in any other subject. That is one of the important aspects. Therefore, what happens? The timeline that you are giving for teaching becomes very, very crisp. Second thing is also in terms of the time that you are spending. The focus has to be on learning outcomes only. So look at all those extra frills that different books carry. Please cut them off. Because if you want to do justice to be able to give the child this journey of traveling from one level to the other, then you cannot be spending time on doing too many frivolous things. Yes, they are all there. How important it is to the current topic, that is something that each of the subject expert has to sit and decide. So let them come up with what is crucial for this and focus only there. It should be like those horse wearing those blinkers, blinds or whatever. You have to have the direction and you need to proceed only in that direction. So no wastage of time, no redundancy, no teaching the same topic again and again. Redundancy, what I mean is there are certain topics which are of no value today. One of my favorite examples, which I always keep talking about, is the chapter of money, where you have coins and you have 1 rupee and 2 rupee. That system is not existent. It is not of use to the child when they are living in an age of plastic money and digital money. So what is the purpose of doing that? You want to know the value of 100, give different values that would add up to become 100. That's a different aspect. But if you have to go through that session of teaching them what money is and what each value is, I think that would not help today. So that is the redundancy we are talking about. Certain things are not of any great value if they are being taught today. I'll give you another example. This was when I was teaching in Australia. It did happen. Children were allowed to use calculator for their exams. Our system doesn't allow children to use calculator. Now, let us look at the pros and cons. There are different reasons and different viewpoints to this, but I will just express what I thought, and I thought it was right. Because there are many things today for which I think using the calculator itself is a skill. And a lot of other things are developed beyond it. Now, what we are trying to do is try and focus with the children, whether or not they have the aptitude to function like a calculator. I think that is not really required. So this is again a redundant thing. Things which are easily available to us, things which we get at the click of a button, things which, like for example, another thing is handwriting. Now, I don't know out of all of us who are here in the audience, who writes today? How many of us write? And how much do we write? Most of the time it is on the system. The whole world is on the system. Yet in the lower grades, there will be so much of time spent in terms of ensuring that the letter touches all the way the red line on top and the blue line at the bottom. And these are the redundant structures where we invest a lot of time, which we don't have to. And when we remove all these redundancy, you will find that the student is kind of more attracted to what we have to offer. These are the things that puts them off and education becomes a boredom for them. So let's move ahead. What are the other components? The topics and activities covered, of course. What are the? Remain focused on the topics and activities. What is important for that particular session or module to complete? Standards of resources required. In the curriculum is where you find out, first of all, you need to have a dynamic curriculum. You need to have relevant topics covered. You need to have the associated field trips, linked to it or found out in terms of how is it. I think, this is one place where I have often found that schools do field trips because they're expected to do so many trips in a year, or they do it because, okay, this is, we have had too much of academics, let us now take a field trip. The purpose of the field trip gets diluted then. So where are you bringing in a field trip? It is an experience. Remember, when a child goes outside the classroom and is in the presence of whatever that particular field trip that you have planned, the place, that environment, and the pleasure of going through it with the right kind of inputs is a different experience altogether, and the child learns brilliantly through it. So how are you planning your field trips? How often are you planning your field trips? Are you planning enough? Are you just doing it because it has to be planned? So those are the thought processes that one should go through when you're structuring your curriculum. What kind of visits? Now, field trips are different, visits are different. How are we differentiating it? Is a visit to a place supposed to be just for the sake of pleasure, or is it supposed to be some kind of an educational gain from it? I think those become important again. Guest lectures, who do we call? Associated people. Today, children don't have to necessarily learn only from what's happening inside the school campus. There's so much that is happening outside, and there is much more happening with people who are working in different work spheres, who are able to come onto different platforms and are able to talk to children and give their first-hand experience. We will talk more about this when we speak about the elements. And of course, the various labs. So what are the associated labs that I have for structuring the kind of curriculum and the kind of experience that I wish to give my students? Do I have all of that? I think that becomes of paramount importance to understand. Teaching methodology. How am I going to take a particular topic? What kind of experience learning am I planning? Am I planning a flipped class? Do I really know how to do a flipped class? These things become extremely important. What is peer learning? And how important is peer learning? I think very recently I went through a video which gave a beautiful, beautiful perspective to peer learning. It spoke about, it is not, why is peer learning effective? I think that was what was being addressed over there. It said that as a person in the classroom who perhaps knows, as an adult, knows much more about the particular topic, has perhaps a great idea of the related topics of the main topic, we may not perceive what the child perceives. Like, for example, if I am there as a student and I have a friend, now my friend has easily understood in terms of what has been explained, while I have a problem understanding it. But then my child is the one who has had similar fears like me, in the sense our knowledge about it might be limited. Our experiences might be within what we would have experienced at that age, not beyond. And therefore, our fears in the mind are similar. Therefore, when the child experience, that friend explains to me, I am able to understand better when compared to an adult who explains it in whichever way you may want to. You might do hundreds of things, but the best experience comes in when this peer talks to me. So that, how much am I catering for that kind of learning? Is there a provision, or is there absolutely no provision? And how am I facilitating that kind of learning? Am I able to pair the right kind of children? And am I able to bring in the most that children can do? So practically everything under the sky, children can learn on their own. Because to going ahead, two things that NEP directly focuses on is self-learning and research skills in students. So how does self-learning happen? How am I going to ensure that the child is a self-learner? One of the important aspects, I think both Funduda and Perennial will definitely agree with me, is developing reading skills. It is to be underlined. Reading skills has to be a thing that has to be done on a daily basis in every school. So does your curriculum for language, do you have a curriculum? You might have a curriculum for language, but do you have a curriculum for reading skills? How much of time are you investing in reading skills? Because if the child has to be a self-learner, if the child should be able to read anything that you give him, if he can open up any site and digest every information that is there, then he has to be a very good self-learner. He has to have extremely good comprehension skills. So how is the system assisting that kind of skills provision for that? How does he become a peer learner if he doesn't have reading skills and comprehension skills himself? So these are the things that has to be catered for when you're doing your curriculum. Assessing student achievements. So what kind of projects will I create for the topics that has been dealt with in the curriculum? What kind of assignments will I be looking at? So there has to be a plan for it. Are we looking at an assignment and a project for every subject taught separately? I think those days are completely gone. They need to work in teams. They need to research. They need to bring in information. They need to bring in their own solution. And how are you facilitating that? And how is that planned for in the curriculum? Therefore, what goes into the curriculum, I don't have to specify it again. It is extremely important that there is sufficient time given for these things. And there's a brainstorming that happens as frequently as possible, because you never know what you started off in the beginning of the year might not be what you need to do by the end of the year the way things are progressing in the immediate environment. Again, what kind of projects? Is it an individual project? Is it a team project? How is the team going to present it? What are the things that the team decides? How are you facilitating them to decide? Are you giving them instructions, or are they taking up instructions? What is project-based learning? Are the teachers familiar with it? What do we choose and make a project-based learning and put it in the curriculum? Does it involve structuring around a single subject or a topic, or does it involve several topics across different subjects? What kind of a project are you giving them is of great importance. And last but not the least is the feedbacks. Does your curriculum have a structure that is flexible enough to accommodate the feedbacks that you are receiving? Like, for example, I have decided to do an activity X. And when I take the feedback, I realize that perhaps the kind of resources that I have asked the children to refer to are not right. Perhaps the methodology that I have asked them to adopt is not working. Perhaps the result doesn't come because of some miscalculation or some kind of an data information, which is misleading. So how much is my curriculum flexible enough to ensure that when I'm getting these feedbacks through self-evaluation forms from the children, through peer evaluation forms from the children, through facilitator-led group discussions, what is the feedback I'm getting, and is my curriculum strong enough to restructure it so that you don't have to go through the same problem the year next to it? Now, these are the things that a curriculum should be having. The important components which perhaps will make learning a fantastic experience for the learner.